A poor waitress is refilling coffee in a quiet diner when a mysterious billionaire looks her straight in the eyes and says, "By spring, you'll birth me 3 sons." Everyone freezes. She laughs it off until he shows up again with an offer that changes everything. He's rich, powerful, and untouched by any woman since tragedy took the love of his life. She's struggling to care for her sick mother and fighting to keep her faith in a world that's been cruel to her. But when he offers her a deal, a fake engagement that could save her family, she says yes, not realizing his strange prophecy might mean something far deeper than she can imagine. As love starts to bloom, secrets begin to surface. Whispers spread, lies twist, and when she runs from him, believing his silence has betrayed her, fate strikes harder than either of them expects. Now, as winter turns to spring, was his prophecy madness, or a miracle waiting to be born? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The fluorescent lights of Hattie's diner buzzed softly overhead as Raina Brooks moved between the booths, her sensible shoes squeaking against the worn linoleum floor. Outside, the rain continued its relentless drumming against the windows, marking day 3 of the storm that had settled over their small southern town like a heavy blanket. "More coffee, Mr. Thompson?" Raina asked, already tilting the pot toward the elderly man's cup. He nodded, his weathered hands wrapped around the white ceramic mug for warmth. Her lower back ached from the double shift, but she kept her smile steady. Her mother's medication wasn't going to pay for itself, and these extra hours meant the difference between making rent and falling behind. The diner's regular customers had thinned out as the evening wore on, leaving mainly truckers seeking shelter from the storm and locals with nowhere else to be. And him, Booth 7. Kevin Drayton sat alone, as he had every night this week. His expensive coat hung neatly on the hook beside him, his laptop closed on the table. Unlike the other customers who chatted, read newspapers, or stared at their phones, he seemed to exist in his own bubble of stillness. The whispers had started the first night he appeared. "That's the tech billionaire," Martha from the beauty salon had said, her voice barely containing her excitement. "The one who went off the grid after his fiancée died in that plane crash." Raina had heard the stories, how he'd built his fortune from nothing, how he'd vanished from public life after the tragedy. But stories were just stories, and to her, he was simply the quiet man who ordered black coffee and barely touched his food. She approached his table, notepad ready. "Can I get you anything else this evening, sir?" For the first time since he'd started coming to the diner, Kevin Drayton looked up and met her eyes. The intensity of his grey gaze stopped her breath for a moment. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, but inside the diner, everything seemed to go still. "By spring," he said, his voice calm and certain, "you'll birth me 3 sons." The coffee pot nearly slipped from Raina's grasp. The clatter of silverware ceased as every head in the diner turned toward Booth 7. She could feel the weight of their stares, could practically hear the thoughts forming in their minds. A nervous laugh escaped her lips, more from shock than humor. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" she managed, trying to keep her voice steady. Kevin didn't flinch or show any sign of embarrassment. He simply nodded, as if he'd just commented on the weather or ordered a slice of pie. "You heard me correctly," he said, his expression unchanging. Raina's cheeks burned. In all her years of waiting tables, she'd dealt with her share of difficult customers. The flirters, the complainers, the ones who left pennies for tips. But this was different. This was beyond inappropriate. It was unsettling. "Sir," she started, keeping her voice low but firm, "I don't know if you're trying to be funny, but that kind of comment isn't appropriate. A few booths down, old Joe Winters cleared his throat loudly, ready to intervene if needed. But Kevin's demeanor remained calm, almost detached. He reached for his coffee cup, took a deliberate sip, and set it back down with precise movements. "I understand your reaction," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed diner. "I wouldn't believe it either. But I've learned that when God gives you a vision, you don't question it. You accept it." The mixture of confusion and embarrassment made Raina's hands tremble slightly. She was aware of Hattie watching from behind the counter, her arms crossed, ready to step in. The last thing Raina needed was to lose her job over some rich man's strange behavior. "Would you like your check?" she asked, trying to redirect the conversation to safer ground. Kevin pulled out his wallet and placed several crisp $100 bills on the table, far more than his meal could have cost. "Keep the change," he said, standing up and reaching for his coat. "You'll need it for the babies." The diner erupted in whispers as he walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back to look at Raina one last time. "I'll see you tomorrow evening," he said, as if making a normal dinner reservation. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped out into the rain, leaving Raina standing there, holding her notepad like a shield. She could feel the stares of the other customers, could hear the murmurs starting to build. "Girl, what was that all about?" Hattie called from behind the counter, her voice sharp with concern and curiosity. Raina shook her head, trying to gather herself. "I honestly don't know, Mrs. Miller," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She moved mechanically through the rest of her shift, refilling coffee cups and taking orders, but her mind kept returning to those strange words and the absolute certainty in Kevin Drayton's eyes. The $100 bills felt like they were burning a hole in her apron pocket. As the night wore on, the rain continued to fall, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting their harsh glow over the diner's worn surfaces. Raina couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in her world, like the first tremor before an earthquake. She didn't know whether to be frightened or intrigued by Kevin Drayton's prophecy, but she knew one thing for certain. Her quiet life serving coffee in this small southern town would never be quite the same again. The drive home that night felt longer than usual. Raina's hands gripped the steering wheel of her old Honda as she navigated through puddle-filled streets, windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm against the persistent rain. Every few seconds, Kevin Drayton's words echoed in her mind. "By spring, you'll birth me 3 sons." The streetlights cast wavering reflections on the wet pavement, and Raina found herself taking the turns slower than necessary, lost in thought. What kind of man walks into a diner and makes a proclamation like that? And why did it feel less like harassment and more like something else? Something she couldn't quite name. When she pulled into the driveway of their small ranch house, the living room lights were still on. Raina gathered her purse and the takeout container of leftover pie she'd brought for her mother, then hurried through the rain to the front door. Inside, the TV cast a blue glow across the living room. Dolores Brooks was asleep on the couch, her reading glasses slightly askew, an open Bible resting on her lap. The sight made Raina's heart squeeze with familiar tenderness and worry. Her mother looked so small these days, fragile as a bird, though her spirit remained as strong as ever. Raina set down her things quietly and grabbed the soft afghan from the back of the recliner. As she draped it over her mother, Dolores stirred slightly but didn't wake. The medication often made her drowsy, but at least it helped with the pain. Kneeling beside the couch, Raina closed her eyes and did what she always did when life confused her. She prayed. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't understand what's happening. If this is you moving in some way, please give me wisdom, and if it's not—" She paused, uncertain how to continue. Just keep us safe and show us your path. The TV murmured softly in the background as Raina stayed there a moment longer, one hand resting on her mother's arm. Kevin Drayton's words felt simultaneously like complete madness and like something deeper. A prophecy, maybe, though she'd never been one to put much stock in such things. Her mother was the one who always talked about signs and visions. Sleep proved elusive that night. Raina tossed and turned, her mind spinning with questions. When her alarm went off the next morning, she seriously considered calling in sick. But they needed every dollar, and running away had never been her style. The morning shift started normally enough. The regulars came in for their breakfast, the coffee flowed freely, and Raina fell into her usual routine. But as the hours ticked by, she felt a growing tension in her shoulders, knowing the evening would bring Kevin Drayton back to booth 7. Sure enough, at exactly 6 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed. Raina's back was turned, but she knew it was him from the way conversation in the diner dipped momentarily, before rising again in hushed tones. She took a deep breath, straightened her spine, and turned around. He sat in the same spot, wearing a different but equally expensive-looking suit. This time, when their eyes met, Raina didn't wait for him to speak. She walked directly to his table, order pad in hand but held at her side. "Mr. Drayton," she said quietly, "I think we need to talk about what you said last night." Kevin nodded, as if he'd been expecting this. "Please." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Join me for a moment." Raina glanced toward the counter where Hattie was watching them with narrow eyes. "I can't sit with customers during my shift." "Then I'll wait until you're done," he said simply. "What time?" The directness of his response caught her off guard. I get off at 9. I'll be here." And he was. Through her entire shift, Kevin stayed in that booth, working on a laptop, occasionally accepting refills of coffee. When 9 o'clock came, Raina found herself sliding into the booth across from him, her apron still on, her heart beating a little faster than normal. "What happened to you?" she asked directly. "Why did you say those things?" Kevin closed his laptop and folded his hands on the table. His grey eyes held a weight she hadn't noticed before, not just intensity, but something that looked like pain. 2 years ago, he began, his voice low and controlled. "I was in a plane crash in the Rocky Mountains. My private jet went down in a snowstorm. I was the only survivor." He paused, his fingers tightening slightly. "My fiancée was with me. She didn't make it." Raina's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." He nodded once, acknowledging but not dwelling. "I was trapped in the wreckage for 3 days before they found me. During that time, I had what I can only describe as a vision. I saw a black woman, you, standing in a room filled with light. You were holding 3 newborn babies, and you were placing them in my arms. And then I heard a voice, clear as anything, saying, 'She'll give you sons of mercy.'" The diner had emptied out except for a couple of late-night regulars. In the relative quiet, Raina could hear the coffee maker gurgling and the soft patter of rain against the windows. "Since then," Kevin continued, "I've been searching. I've traveled all over the country, following what felt like breadcrumbs from God. Until I saw you through this window last week, and I knew you were the woman from my vision." Raina sat back, trying to process his words. It sounded crazy. It was crazy. And yet there was something in his manner that made her want to believe him, or at least believe that he believed it. "Mr. Drayton, Kevin, please. Kevin," she amended. "I understand you've been through something traumatic, and I'm truly sorry for your loss. But what you're suggesting, it's not possible. I don't even know you." "I know how it sounds," he said, But I've learned that God's plans don't always make sense to us at first. I'm not asking you to believe me right now. I'm just asking you to be open to the possibility that this is more than coincidence." Before Raina could respond, Hattie appeared at their table, her face set in stern lines. "Raina, can I speak with you for a minute?" In the kitchen, Hattie crossed her arms and fixed Raina with a concerned look. "Girl, what are you doing? Men like that don't see girls like us as equals. Whatever game he's playing, you need to keep your distance." "Mrs. Miller, he's not. I've been around long enough to know trouble when I see it." Hattie cut her off. "Rich white man coming in here, talking about babies to a young black waitress. Nothing good can come of that." Raina wanted to argue, to defend Kevin's sincerity, but she knew how it looked. She knew the history that made Hattie's warnings necessary. And yet, later that night, lying in bed, Raina found herself thinking about faith and signs and the mysterious ways God sometimes chose to work. She thought about Moses and the burning bush, about Mary being visited by an angel. She wasn't comparing herself to them. That would be presumptuous, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger than herself was unfolding. The rain had finally stopped, and moonlight filtered through her window, casting shadows on the wall. In the quiet, Raina realized that despite all logic and reason, despite Hattie's warnings and her own doubts, something in her spirit was stirring, a small, quiet voice suggesting that perhaps, just perhaps, God was indeed moving in mysterious ways. The days that followed settled into a strange but comfortable rhythm at Hattie's diner. Kevin became as much a fixture as the neon sign in the window, appearing each evening like clockwork at booth 7. Sometimes he'd arrive just as the sun was setting, other times he'd wait until the dinner rush had died down, but he was always there. On Tuesday evening, Raina noticed he had brought a worn leather Bible. Its pages were marked with colored tabs, and he studied it with the same intensity he gave his laptop on other days. His fingers traced the lines as he read, occasionally making notes in a small journal beside him. "That looks well loved," Raina commented as she refilled his coffee cup. Kevin's lips curved into a slight smile. "It was my grandmother's. She used to say that when life doesn't make sense, the answers are in here." He touched the Bible's cover gently. "I've been doing a lot of searching lately." "Finding any answers?" Raina asked, sliding into the booth across from him during her break. "Some days I think I am. Others?" He shook his head, looking out the window at the passing cars. "After Sarah, my fiancée, died, I lost my way for a while. I had everything the world said I should want. Money, power, success. But I felt hollow inside." Raina watched as his fingers absently traced the rim of his coffee cup. "What changed?" "I walked away from it all," he said simply. "Stepped down as CEO, though I'm still majority shareholder. Made a vow of celibacy too, partly out of grief, partly because I needed to clear my head, figure out what God wanted from me." He met her eyes. "I've been celibate for 2 years now. Until I understand his plan, it feels right to wait." The confession surprised her. Not many men would admit such a thing. It spoke to a deeper character than his wealth suggested. Over the next few days their conversations continued, growing more personal with each passing shift. During quiet moments between customers, Raina found herself sharing pieces of her own life. "Mama's good days are getting fewer," she confided one evening, wiping down nearby tables. "The new medication helps, but it's expensive. That's why I'm working doubles whenever I can." Kevin listened intently as she described the daily routine, waking early to help her mother with breakfast, making sure all the pills were sorted correctly, then rushing to start her shift at the diner. "The hardest part isn't the work," she admitted. "It's feeling invisible sometimes. People see what they expect to see. Just another black waitress in a small southern town. They don't see me struggling to keep my mama comfortable or working on my online classes at night, or... They don't see you. Kevin finished softly. Exactly. Raina smiled, but there was a touch of sadness in it. Some customers still treat me like it's 1950 instead of 2023. Just yesterday, Mrs. Henderson made a point of asking for a different server because she didn't want that girl handling her food. Kevin's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a commotion erupted near the counter. A man who'd been drinking at the bar for the past hour was getting belligerent, his voice rising above the quiet dinner atmosphere. "Hey, I said I needed a refill." He slammed his empty glass down, making other customers jump. Raina approached him cautiously. "Sir, I think you've had enough for tonight. Can I get you some coffee instead?" The man's face twisted ugly. "Don't tell me what I've had enough of, girl. You people always think you know better, don't you?" The slur that followed seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Other customers looked away uncomfortably, but no one moved to intervene. Raina felt the familiar burn of humiliation, mixed with anger she couldn't safely express. Then Kevin was there, standing between them. He wasn't much taller than the drunk man, but his presence commanded attention. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but carried an authority that made everyone listen. "I believe you owe this lady an apology," he said. The drunk man sneered. "Mind your own business, rich boy. The way you speak to God's children is everyone's business." Kevin replied evenly. "Now you have two choices. You can apologize sincerely and leave quietly, or we can call the police and let them handle this. Either way, you're done here." Something in Kevin's steady gaze must have gotten through, because the man's bravado deflated. He mumbled what passed for an apology, then stumbled towards the door. "Wait," Kevin called. He pulled out his wallet and handed a card to Hattie. "Please put everyone's meals on my tab tonight, including his." After the commotion died down and the other customers returned to their meals, Raina found a moment to thank Kevin. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. Kevin's eyes held hers with that same unwavering intensity she'd come to know. "A man who fears God protects his daughters," he said simply. Then, more quietly, "No one should ever make you feel invisible, Raina." Standing there in the warm diner light, Raina felt something shift inside her, like ice breaking up after a long winter. She saw the same thaw reflected in Kevin's eyes, a softening around the edges of his usual reserve. Neither of them spoke of his prophecy or the vision that had brought him here, but in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition that perhaps they had both been lonely in their own ways, both searching for something they couldn't quite name. The evening settled back into its routine. Coffee poured, orders taken, dishes cleared, but something had changed. Like the first hint of spring after a hard frost, both Raina and Kevin felt the stirring of something new, something that felt surprisingly like hope. The mid-March morning dawned crisp and clear, a welcome change from the endless rain. Raina pulled into the diner's parking lot 15 minutes before her shift, just like always. But today was different. Kevin Drayton stood waiting by the entrance, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the early light. He held a white envelope in his hands. Her stomach did an odd little flip as she parked her old Honda. Over the past 2 weeks, their conversations had grown deeper, more meaningful. She'd found herself looking forward to his visits, even while trying to keep her guard up about his strange prophecy. "Good morning," Kevin said as she approached. His grey eyes were serious, his usually calm demeanor showing hints of tension. "Morning," Raina replied, fishing her keys from her purse. "You're here early." "I needed to speak with you." He glanced at the envelope. "Privately, if possible." Raina unlocked the diner's front door, flipping on lights as they entered the empty restaurant. The coffee maker gurgled to life as she started her opening routine, trying to ignore the weight of Kevin's presence. "I have a business proposition for you," he said finally, placing the envelope on the counter between them. Raina paused in laying out clean silverware. A business proposition. Inside that envelope is a formal offer. Kevin's voice was steady, practiced. "I need someone to pose as my fiancé for 3 months. The fork in Raina's hand clattered against the counter. "Excuse me?" "My former company is facing a hostile takeover. The board is using my personal situation as leverage. They're claiming I'm mentally unstable after Sarah's death, that I've become a liability." His jaw tightened. "The company bylaws include a family stability clause. If I can demonstrate I'm in a committed relationship, moving forward with my life, I can block the takeover and protect thousands of jobs." Raina stared at him, trying to process his words. "And you want me to pretend to be your fiancé? The arrangement would include full compensation for your time, a generous monthly stipend, plus complete coverage of your mother's medical expenses, past, present, and future." He pushed the envelope toward her. "Everything's detailed inside, including the confidentiality agreements." Heat rose in Raina's cheeks as understanding dawned. "So that's what this has all been about. Getting to know me, protecting me from that drunk customer. It was all just setting up this business deal?" "No, it's not like that," Kevin started, but Raina cut him off. "I may be just a waitress from a small town, Mr. Drayton, but you can't buy my dignity." She pushed the envelope back, her hands shaking. "I'm not for sale." "This isn't about buying anything," Kevin insisted. "I believe God brought us together for a reason. The vision." "The vision?" Raina laughed, but it held no humor. "The vision where I give you 3 sons, and this is step 1 in making that happen, playing pretend until I fall for you for real?" Kevin's face remained carefully neutral. "I understand your skepticism, but please, just read the offer. Pray about it." "I don't need to pray about selling myself," Raina said firmly. "The answer is no." The morning prep routine saved her from further discussion as other staff began arriving. Kevin left the envelope on the counter, and Raina deliberately ignored it as she went about her work. But the day was determined to test her resolve. Around lunchtime, Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield came in with her garden club friends, all wealthy women who treated the diner like their personal country club. Raina had served them countless times before, always with practiced patience. "I specifically asked for lemon with my tea," Mrs. Whitfield complained, though Raina had already placed a lemon wedge on her saucer. "Yes, ma'am. It's right there beside your cup. Don't take that tone with me, young lady." Mrs. Whitfield's perfectly lined eyes narrowed. "Really, Hattie needs to do a better job training her help these days." Raina bit her tongue and forced a smile. "Is there anything else you need, ma'am?" But Mrs. Whitfield was already rising, her chair scraping back dramatically. Hattie, I need to speak with you immediately." What followed was humiliation in slow motion. Mrs. Whitfield loudly complained about Raina's attitude problem and lack of proper respect. Other customers watched uncomfortably as Hattie Miller emerged from the kitchen, her face set in grim lines. "Raina, in my office, now." The walk to the small office felt like a march to execution. Raina's legs trembled as she closed the door behind her. "Mrs. Whitfield is one of our most influential customers," Hattie began, not meeting Raina's eyes. "Her friends make up half our lunch business." "I didn't do anything wrong," Raina said quietly. "I was polite, just like always. It doesn't matter what you did or didn't do. What matters is perception." Hattie sighed heavily. "I'm sorry, Raina, but I can't risk losing her business. We're going to have to let you go." The words hit like a physical blow. Please, Hattie, you know me. I've worked here for 4 years. My mama's medical bills. I'm sorry, Hattie repeated, still not looking at her. You can collect your final check on Friday. Raina drove home in a daze, tears blurring her vision. The envelope Kevin had left sat on her passenger seat. She'd grabbed it automatically while cleaning out her locker, not even thinking about it at the time. Her mother was napping when she got home, thank God. Rana couldn't bear to tell her the truth yet. Instead, she went to her room, sank to her knees beside her bed, and did what she'd always done in times of trouble. She prayed. Lord, I don't understand, she whispered. I've worked hard, stayed honest, tried to do right by everyone. Why this? Why now? Thunder rumbled outside, though the sky had been clear that morning. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Kevin. The offer stands. God doesn't open doors for nothing. Raina stared at the message, then at the envelope beside her. Pride told her to throw it away unopened, but practicality whispered about bills piling up, about her mother's medication, about the reality of finding another job in a small town where word traveled fast. Another roll of thunder shook the windows as Raina sat there, torn between dignity and desperation, wondering if sometimes God's answers came in packages we'd rather not open. Morning sunlight glinted off the chrome fixtures of Murphy's Corner Cafe as Raina pulled into the parking lot. The small breakfast spot sat at the edge of town, far enough from Hattie's diner that she wouldn't have to worry about gossip. Kevin's black Mercedes already waited in a corner spot, its polished surface reflecting the rising sun. Her fingers tightened around the envelope in her lap. She'd spent half the night reading through his offer, trying to find the catch, the hidden trap. The terms were simple but generous. More money than she'd make in 5 years at the diner, full medical coverage for her mother, and a guarantee that her reputation would be protected by ironclad confidentiality agreements. Still, her hand trembled as she pushed open the cafe door. The bell's cheerful jingle felt wrong for such a serious moment. Kevin sat in a corner booth, a cup of black coffee untouched before him. He stood when he saw her, that same careful politeness she'd noticed at the diner. Thank you for coming, he said softly. Raina slid into the booth across from him, setting the envelope between them like a barrier. I came to return this. A waitress approached with a menu, but Raina waved her off. Kevin waited until they were alone again before speaking. Before you say no again, please let me explain everything. His grey eyes held none of yesterday's business-like detachment. Instead, they carried a weight of something deeper, loss, perhaps, or loneliness. Not as a proposition, but as a person. Raina hesitated, then nodded. I'm listening. 2 years ago, I had everything the world says should make you happy. Money, power, a beautiful fiancé, a company that was changing the world. His fingers traced patterns in the condensation on his coffee cup. Then Sarah, my fiancé, died in that plane crash, and I realized how empty it all was, how I'd built my life on shifting sand. I'm sorry about your fiancé, Raina said quietly. The crash should have killed me too. I was supposed to be on that plane, but I stayed behind for a meeting. His voice grew distant. I spent 3 days in the mountains afterward, just walking, asking God why he spared me. That's when I had the vision. A couple at a nearby table laughed at something, the sound jarring against Kevin's solemnity. He waited for the moment to pass before continuing. I saw you, Raina. I didn't know your name or where to find you, but I saw your face as clearly as I see it now. You were holding 3 baby boys, and there was this peace. Like everything finally made sense. He leaned forward slightly. I've spent 2 years searching, trying to understand why God showed me that future. When I walked into Hattie's and saw you, I knew. But this arrangement, pretending to be engaged, That's not exactly following God's plan, Raina pointed out. Maybe it's the path to it. Kevin's expression softened. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me, Raina. I'm asking you to help me save the company I built. A company that employs thousands of people, that funds medical research and clean water projects around the world. The board wants to sell to investors who would strip it down for parts. And you need a fiancé to stop that. I need to prove I'm stable, settled. After Sarah died, I wasn't myself. The board thinks I'm unstable, too grief-stricken to lead. He spread his hands. 3 months. That's all I'm asking. You'll stay at my estate in the Blue Ridge Mountains, separate wings of the house, complete privacy. Your mother will have the best medical care available, and when it's over, you'll have enough money to start fresh anywhere you want. Raina stared down at the envelope. And my reputation? In a small town like this, people talk. We'll say we met through my charity foundation. Everything will be above board, respectable. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand. I know I'm asking a lot, but I believe God brought us together for a reason. Maybe not the one I saw in my vision, but something important. I need time to pray about this, Raina said finally. Kevin nodded. Take all the time you need. That night, Raina knelt beside her bed like she had as a child, pouring out her heart to God. The moon cast silver shadows through her window as she wrestled with the decision. Pride told her to refuse. But was it really pride? Or was it fear? And if God had truly orchestrated this meeting, wasn't refusing his plan its own kind of pride? She thought of her mother, sleeping down the hall, worried about being a burden. She thought of the mounting bills, the medications they could barely afford. She thought of Kevin's eyes when he spoke of his vision, not calculating or cunning, but searching, almost desperate for understanding. Morning found her with clarity, if not certainty. She called Kevin and said one word. Yes. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. She packed a single suitcase, mostly practical clothes, a few nice outfits for any public appearances. Her mother cried when Raina explained she'd taken a job as a live-in companion for a wealthy widower's elderly mother. Not quite a lie, she told herself, just a gentler version of the truth. It's just 3 months, Raina whispered, hugging her mother tight. And the doctors will take such good care of you while I'm gone. My brave girl, her mother said, touching her cheek. Always taking care of everyone else. Kevin waited outside in his black Mercedes, as formal and polite as ever in his charcoal suit. He took her suitcase, holding the car door open with old-world courtesy. As they pulled away from the curb, Raina watched her small hometown begin to shrink in the rear-view mirror. The familiar streets and shops grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared around a bend, hidden by the first misty slopes of the Blue Ridge Mountains rising before them. She pressed her hand against the cool glass of the window, watching the landscape change. Pine trees and rocky outcrops replaced the flat farmland she'd known all her life. The road wound higher, carrying her toward a future she couldn't begin to imagine. The winding mountain road finally opened onto a vista that took Raina's breath away. Kevin's estate sprawled across the mountainside like something from a dream, walls of gleaming glass reflecting the afternoon sun, the structure somehow both grand and perfectly at home among the ancient pines. A crystal-clear river wound through the valley below, its waters catching golden light. Welcome home, Kevin said softly, steering the Mercedes onto a private drive bordered by carefully tended wildflowers. Raina clutched her worn leather purse closer, suddenly very aware of her thrift store coat and scuffed boots. It's overwhelming. It's just a house, Kevin replied, though his tone suggested he understood her discomfort. The chapel is my favorite part, actually. As if on cue, They rounded a bend, and Rayna caught sight of it. A small stone chapel nestled among the trees beside the main house, its simple cross reaching toward heaven. Something in her chest eased at the sight. At least there was one place here that felt familiar. The car crunched to a stop on the circular drive, and immediately a well-dressed older woman emerged from the house, followed by two younger staff members. Rayna noticed how they tried to hide their curious glances, their gazes flickering between her and Kevin as he helped her from the car. "Ms. Harrison." Kevin nodded to the older woman. "This is my fiancée, Rayna Brooks. She'll be staying with us for the foreseeable future." "Welcome, Miss Brooks." Ms. Harrison's smile was professional but warm. "I'm the head housekeeper. We've prepared the blue suite for you in the East Wing." "Thank you," Rayna managed, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Please call me Rayna." Kevin placed a gentle hand at the small of her back, the first time he'd really touched her, guiding her towards the entrance. "Let's get you settled before dinner." The interior was just as impressive as the exterior. Soaring ceilings, artwork that probably cost more than her mother's house, furniture that looked too perfect to actually use. But there were touches of warmth too. Fresh flowers in crystal vases, soft throws draped over chairs, well-worn books stacked on coffee tables. The blue suite turned out to be larger than her entire apartment back home. A sitting room opened onto a bedroom with views of the mountains, and the bathroom featured a tub big enough to swim in. Her single suitcase looked lost and lonely when the young staff member set it beside the massive bed. "Dinner is at 7, Ms. Harrison informed her. "Would you like help unpacking?" "No, thank you," Rayna said quickly. "I can manage." Once alone, she sank onto the edge of the bed, running her hand over the impossibly soft duvet. "Lord," she whispered, "what have I gotten myself into?" She spent the next hour carefully hanging up her meager wardrobe, trying not to compare her clothes to the obvious quality of everything around her. At least she'd brought her one good dress, a navy blue wrap style she'd splurged on for church last Easter. At 7 o'clock sharp, another staff member appeared to escort her to dinner. The dining room was intimate compared to the rest of the house, with a table set for just two. Kevin was already there, having changed into casual slacks and a soft sweater that made him look more approachable than his usual suits. "I thought we could eat alone tonight," he said, pulling out her chair. "Give us a chance to talk." The food was simple but perfect. Roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, warm bread that melted in her mouth. As they ate, conversation flowed more naturally than Rayna expected. "Tell me about your faith journey," Kevin said, refilling her water glass. "You have a piece about you that's rare." Rayna considered her words carefully. "My mama taught me that faith isn't just for Sundays. When times were hard, and they were often hard, she'd say, 'Baby, God ain't brought us this far to leave us now.' Even when she got sick, her faith never wavered." "That's beautiful," Kevin said quietly. "I lost my way after Sarah died, blamed God, stopped going to church. The vision in the mountains was the first time I felt his presence again." "Can I ask?" Rayna hesitated, then decided to be bold. "You're young, successful, handsome. Why stay alone all this time?" A faint blush colored Kevin's cheeks. "You're asking why a billionaire is still a virgin?" "Well, when you put it that way." Rayna laughed, breaking the tension. "After Sarah died, I made a vow," he explained, his expression growing serious. "Not just about physical intimacy, but about keeping my heart pure too. I needed to find myself again, find God again, before I could think about loving someone else." The honesty in his voice struck Rayna deeply. Here was a man who could have anything, or anyone, he wanted, choosing instead a path of discipline and faith. She thought about her own past relationships, how often she'd compromised her values hoping to find love. Purity isn't just about the body. Kevin continued softly. It's about the heart, too. About waiting for God's timing instead of forcing our own. They finished dinner in contemplative silence, the weight of his words settling between them. Later, as Raina prepared for bed in her luxurious suite, she could hear the wind howling through the valley outside her windows. The sound was lonely but somehow purifying, like it was sweeping away her old doubts and fears. She knelt beside the bed to pray, as she did every night, but this time her prayers were different. Instead of asking for help or guidance, she found herself thanking God for bringing her to this strange new chapter in her life. Maybe Kevin wasn't just meant to receive healing through their arrangement, maybe she was meant to find healing too. The wind continued its wild song outside, but inside Raina felt an unfamiliar peace settling over her. Whatever came next, she was beginning to believe that God's hand was truly in it all. The days began to settle into a gentle rhythm at Kevin's mountain estate. Each morning, Raina would wake just before sunrise, drawn to the warmth and bustle of the large kitchen, where Maria, the cook, had already started her day's work. "You don't have to help, Miss Brooks," Maria would say. But her eyes sparkled with appreciation as Raina tied on an apron and began kneading dough or chopping vegetables alongside her. "Please, just call me Raina," she'd respond, finding comfort in the familiar motions of cooking. It reminded her of Sunday mornings with her mother, preparing meals for after-church fellowship. The kitchen work grounded her, gave structure to her mornings. She learned Maria's family recipes, stories spilling out between measurements of flour and pinches of spice. The older woman had worked for Kevin since he first bought the estate, and her tales painted a picture of a man who'd changed dramatically after his loss. "He used to be all business," Maria confided one morning as they shaped rolls together. "But that accident in the mountains, it changed him. Made him softer somehow. More human." After helping with lunch preparation, Raina would change into comfortable shoes and explore the extensive gardens. Even in the cool mountain air, the grounds remained beautiful. Perfectly maintained paths winding through dormant flower beds and elegant stone fountains. She often found herself stopping at different spots to pray, feeling closer to God in the peaceful sanctuary of nature than she ever had in a church building. The afternoons stretched long and quiet, but it was the evenings she began to anticipate most. Each night after dinner, Kevin would invite her to join him in the library, where a fire always crackled in the massive stone hearth. They'd sit in matching leather chairs, Bibles open on their laps, and discuss scripture until the flames died down to embers. "What do you make of this passage?" he'd ask, genuine curiosity in his voice, as they explored familiar verses with fresh eyes. Their discussions often lasted hours, ranging from simple matters of faith to complex questions of divine purpose. Kevin's intelligence was obvious, but he never made her feel inferior when she offered simpler interpretations. Instead, he seemed to value her practical, heartfelt approach to scripture. One particularly cold evening, about a week into her stay, Raina felt drawn to the chapel Kevin had built on the property. It was a simple structure of glass and stone, with windows that framed the mountains like living paintings. She knelt at the altar, lost in prayer, not hearing the door open behind her. "May I join you?" Kevin's voice was soft, respectful of the sacred space. Raina nodded, and he knelt beside her, leaving appropriate distance between them. They prayed in silence for several minutes before Kevin spoke again. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Since you've been here, I've been feeling something I haven't felt in years." Raina turned to look at him, trying to read his expression in the dim light. "Peace," he continued. "Real peace, not just the absence of chaos, but true spiritual peace. Your presence here, your faith, your grace, It's affecting me in ways I didn't expect." The honesty in his voice touched something deep in Raina's heart. "Maybe that's part of God's plan," she suggested gently. "Maybe we're meant to help heal each other." They talked for hours in that chapel, their voices soft against the stone walls. Kevin shared more about his fiancée, Sarah, about the guilt he'd carried for being too busy with work to join her on the flight that crashed. Raina spoke about her father's abandonment, her mother's illness, and her own struggles with trust and faith. "How do you forgive so easily?" Kevin asked, genuine wonder in his voice. "Who says it's easy?" Raina smiled sadly. "But holding on to hurt only hurts yourself more. Forgiveness is a choice you have to make every single day." The next morning, Kevin caught her after breakfast, looking somewhat nervous, an unusual expression for a man who typically radiated confidence. "There's a charity gala next weekend," he said, running a hand through his dark hair, "for the Children's Hospital Foundation. I'd like you to come with me, not as part of our arrangement, but as my guest, if you'd like to, that is." Raina blinked in surprise. "I don't have anything suitable to wear to something like that." "Actually?" Kevin smiled. "Come with me." He led her to one of the estate's many rooms she hadn't yet explored. Inside, on a dress form, stood the most beautiful gown she'd ever seen. The deep burgundy fabric seemed to shimmer in the morning light, the cut modest but elegant, with long sleeves and a graceful neckline. "I had it made for you," Kevin explained, watching her face carefully. "Maria helped with your measurements. If you don't like it—" "It's beautiful," Raina breathed, reaching out to touch the fabric with trembling fingers. No one had ever given her something so fine. "But it's too much." "Nothing is too much for someone who's brought light back into this house," Kevin said quietly. That evening, they shared tea on the terrace, wrapped in warm blankets against the mountain chill. The first snow of the season began to fall, delicate flakes drifting down from the dark sky. "Look," Kevin said softly, holding out his hand to catch a snowflake. "Each one unique, each one perfect in its own way." Raina watched the snow fall, feeling a lightness in her heart she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since arriving at the estate, her smile held no trace of worry or reserve. Here, surrounded by beauty and treated with such unexpected kindness, she felt something shifting in her soul, as if God was gently showing her that she deserved more than just surviving. The snow continued to fall, transforming the world around them into something magical and new. They sat in comfortable silence, sipping their tea, each lost in their own thoughts but somehow more connected than ever before. The grand hill crest. Hotel's ballroom sparkled like a crystal cave, with chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across the polished marble floor. Raina stood at the entrance, her heart beating rapidly beneath the burgundy gown Kevin had given her. The dress fit perfectly, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't. "Ready?" Kevin asked softly, offering his arm. He looked distinguished in his black tuxedo, his grey eyes warm with encouragement. "As I'll ever be," Raina whispered, slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. They descended the curved staircase together, and Raina felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the crowd like ripples in a pond. She caught fragments as they passed. "That waitress he's been seen with. Certainly knows how to clean up. What could he possibly see in her?" Kevin's board members clustered near the champagne fountain, their disapproval barely masked behind crystal flutes. Mrs. Henderson, the chief financial officer's wife, gave Raina a look that could freeze water. "Kevin, darling," she called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We've missed you at the country club. Do bring your friend by sometime." "Thank you, Margaret," Kevin replied smoothly. "Raina and I prefer quiet evenings at home. She's teaching me the value of simplicity." Raina squeezed his arm gratefully, though her cheeks burned. She could feel the judgment radiating from the group. These powerful men and women who saw her as nothing more than an interloper, a gold digger who'd somehow trapped their golden boy. The evening progressed like a complicated dance. Raina tried to remember all the etiquette Kevin had taught her, which fork to use, how to hold her champagne glass, the proper way to accept introductions. She was managing well until she overheard two board members speaking behind a massive flower arrangement. "He's lost his mind." One muttered, "First that religious nonsense, now this charity case. The shareholders won't stand for it." "Did you hear she was a waitress? Serving coffee one day, wearing Valentino the next. It's embarrassing." Raina's hands trembled as she set down her untouched champagne. She was about to excuse herself to the powder room when a reporter from the local society pages approached, notebook in hand. "Mr. Drayton, Ms. Brooks." The reporter smiled, though her eyes held calculation. "The city's been buzzing about your whirlwind romance. How did you two meet?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Raina tensed, waiting for Kevin to give the practiced answer they'd rehearsed. Something vague about mutual friends and shared values. Instead, he took her hand in his thumb brushing over her knuckles with surprising tenderness. "She served me grace before coffee," Kevin said, his voice carrying clearly across the nearby conversations. The sincerity in his tone made Raina's heart skip. "I walked into a diner broken, and she showed me kindness without judgment. That's worth more than all the wealth in this room." The reporter's eyebrows shot up, clearly not expecting such candor. Raina stared at Kevin, moved by his words and the quiet dignity with which he delivered them. He wasn't just defending her, he was declaring her worth in front of everyone who'd doubted it. As the orchestra began playing Moon River, Kevin led her to the dance floor. Other couples parted to give them space, but Raina barely noticed. Kevin's hand was warm against her waist, and he held her with gentle confidence. "Did you mean that?" she whispered as they swayed to the music. "What you told the reporter?" "I meant everything," he murmured, his eyes holding hers. "Including what I said that first night in the diner." Before Raina could process his words, could ask if he truly believed in that strange prophecy about 3 sons, Kevin leaned down and kissed her. His lips were soft, the pressure gentle but sure. The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment, all the glitter and judgment fading away until there was only the warmth of his mouth on hers and the steady beating of their hearts. Somewhere in the distance, cameras flashed. Applause rose from the crowd, though whether from approval or mere politeness, Raina couldn't tell. She didn't care. For those precious seconds, the only reality was Kevin's arms around her, and the surprising rightness of this moment. The drive home was quiet, filled with unspoken words and stolen glances. Kevin's hand found hers across the car's center console, and they stayed that way until they reached the estate. He walked her to a door like a perfect gentleman, kissed her hand, and bid her good night. Hours later, Raina sat in the window seat of her room, still wearing the beautiful gown. She touched her fingers to her lips, remembering the kiss, the warmth of his embrace, the way he'd looked at her as if she were precious. The pretense was crumbling, and she knew it. Somewhere between their fireside talks and tonight's declaration, she'd started falling in love with Kevin Drayton, the real Kevin, not the role she was supposed to play opposite. Outside, snow began to fall again, dusting the chapel's roof with white. Raina pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her reflection ghostly in the darkness. She'd come here for practical reasons, survival really, but now her heart was involved, and that changed everything. The question wasn't whether she was falling in love with Kevin, she already had. The question was whether she could trust that his feelings were real too, or if this was all part of an elaborate divine plan he'd convinced himself was true. The memory of his kiss said it was real. Her practical mind warned her to be careful. But her heart was already his, and that terrified her more than all the judgmental stares in the world. The December morning dawned crisp and clear as a black town car rolled up the estate's curved driveway. Raina stood beside Kevin on the front steps, her heart racing as she watched the vehicle approach. Through the tinted windows, she could make out her mother's silhouette in the back seat. "Are you sure about this?" Raina whispered, gripping Kevin's arm. "Mom's medical care is expensive, and family should never be apart." Kevin said simply, covering her hand with his, "especially during Christmas." The driver opened the door, and Dolores Brooks emerged, looking small but elegant in her new winter coat. Her eyes widened at the sight of the estate, but her gaze quickly found her daughter. "Baby girl!" she called out, opening her arms. Raina rushed down the steps, embracing her mother tightly. The familiar scent of lavender lotion brought tears to her eyes. "Welcome home, Mama." Kevin approached them slowly, his usual reserve softening as he extended his hand to Dolores. "Mrs. Brooks, I'm Kevin Drayton. It's an honor to finally meet you." Dolores studied him carefully, then surprised them both by pulling him into a hug. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "The doctors you sent, the treatments. I haven't felt this good in years." Kevin's cheeks flushed slightly. "Please, it's the least I could do. Your daughter has brought light back into this house." The staff helped settle Dolores into a beautiful ground-floor suite near the garden, equipped with everything she might need for her ongoing care. As they unpacked her things, Raina noticed her mother watching Kevin's interactions with the household staff, how he knew each person's name, how he carried bags himself instead of just directing others. That evening, they gathered in the estate's kitchen. Kevin had dismissed the cook, insisting on helping Raina prepare her mother's favorite meal, chicken and dumplings, just like Sunday dinners back home. He proved surprisingly capable with a knife, carefully dicing carrots while Raina kneaded the dough. "Where did you learn to cook?" Raina asked, flour dusting her cheeks. "My grandmother," Kevin replied, smiling at the memory. "She said a man who can't feed himself isn't ready to feed his soul." Dolores watched them from her comfortable chair by the kitchen island, her knowing smile making Raina blush. The easy domesticity of the moment felt right in a way Raina hadn't expected. The next few days passed in a blur of Christmas preparations. Kevin insisted on decorating the chapel himself, climbing ladders to hang garlands, while Raina supervised from below, her heart in her throat every time he reached too far. Together, they transformed the austere space into something magical, candlelight reflecting off glass ornaments, pine boughs lending their fresh scent to the air. One evening, as snow fell outside, they sat together in the chapel reading from Luke's Gospel. Kevin's voice was steady and reverent as he described the first Christmas, while Dolores hummed carols softly. Raina felt peace settle over her, like a warm blanket. The love growing between her and Kevin seemed as natural as breathing now, something God-given and precious. But paradise, as Raina would learn, often comes with serpents. The following Tuesday, she was bringing tea to Kevin's study when voices drifted through the partially open door. She recognized them as board members who'd stayed after a meeting. "Really, Kevin, this charade has gone on long enough," a man's voice drawled. "The waitress? It's becoming embarrassing." "She's your latest charity project, we get it," a woman added with a brittle laugh. "But there are plenty of suitable women from good families who'd be happy to help with your image problem." Raina's hands trembled, tea sloshing in the cups. She waited for Kevin's response. his defense of her, his rejection of their cruel words. But only silence followed. That night, after her mother had gone to bed, Raina found Kevin in his office. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "When they called me your charity project." Kevin looked up from his papers, surprise crossing his features. "You heard that?" "I heard everything," Raina said, wrapping her arms around herself. "And what hurts most is that you stayed silent. If you believe in us, in what God is doing here, why won't you stand up for me?" "Raina," Kevin sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Business relationships are complicated. Sometimes silence is—" "Don't." She cut him off. "Don't make excuses. I need to know if you'll defend me publicly. Not just in private moments, but when it matters." He reached for her hand, but Raina stepped back. "Please," she whispered. "Just think about it." The next morning, Kevin had an important board meeting. Against her better judgment, Raina attended as his fiancé, hoping he'd prove her fears wrong. She sat quietly as they discussed quarterly reports and market projections, her back straight despite the sideways glances. Then it happened. An executive, silver-haired and smugly confident, made a comment about the diner girl while discussing public perception. The room grew quiet, all eyes turning to Kevin. Raina held her breath, waiting for him to speak up, to show them all that their love was real and right. But Kevin just cleared his throat and moved on to the next agenda item. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Raina packed her bag with trembling hands. She folded the beautiful clothes he'd given her, leaving them in neat piles. Her old waitress uniform, which she'd kept as a reminder, went into the suitcase along with her few personal items. At her desk, she wrote a note, tears smudging the ink. "I can't be your image. I wanted to be your heart." She set it on his pillow, knowing he'd find it in the morning. Then she crept downstairs, pausing only to kiss her sleeping mother's forehead and leave her a separate note explaining everything. The night air was bitter cold as she stepped outside, but not as cold as the realization that sometimes love isn't enough, not when one person is willing to keep it hidden in shadows. The steering wheel felt cold under Raina's fingers as she drove through the pre-dawn darkness, streetlights casting lonely shadows across her old Honda's dashboard. Her small apartment waited ahead, a place she'd once called home, but now felt like a step backward. Each mile marker taking her further from the mountains made her heart ache a little more. The sun was barely rising when she pulled into the cramped parking lot of her apartment complex. The familiar sight of peeling paint and rusty railings brought tears to her eyes. This wasn't how the story was supposed to end. But then again, fairy tales didn't usually involve billionaires who couldn't stand up for the women they claimed to love. Inside, the apartment felt smaller than she remembered. Dust had collected on the few pieces of furniture she'd left behind. Raina dropped her suitcase by the door and sank onto the worn couch, letting exhaustion wash over her. The next morning, she walked into Freddie's grocery store, where the manager, Mrs. Peterson, still remembered her from high school. "Need your old job back?" the older woman asked kindly, noticing something broken in Raina's eyes. Within an hour, Raina was wearing a green apron, stocking shelves with canned goods. Double shifts became her new normal again. Morning till afternoon in the grocery aisles, evening till night at the register. Her feet ached like they used to at the diner. But this pain felt different, emptier somehow. When her mother called, Raina forced cheerfulness into her voice. "Everything's fine, Mama. Kevin's just busy with work, and I needed some time at home." The lies tasted bitter, but she couldn't bear to admit the truth, that she'd walked away from what might have been God's plan because pride and pain had gotten the better of her. Dolores, still staying at Kevin's estate for her treatments, seemed to sense something was wrong but didn't push. "The mountains sure are pretty this time of year," she'd say instead. "The nurse says the air up here is doing wonders for my breathing." 2 weeks crawled by. Raina tried to lose herself in work, in the mundane rhythm of scanning groceries and counting change. But every time she saw a business magazine with Kevin's face on the cover, or heard his company mentioned on the break room TV, her heart would skip painfully. Then came the day that changed everything. Raina was restocking the cereal aisle when Martha, the cashier, came running. "Turn on your phone, quick, Channel 7. Hands shaking, Raina pulled out her phone and pulled up the local news station. The headline made her blood run cold. "Breaking. Tech billionaire Kevin Drayton collapses during press conference." The shaky footage showed Kevin at a podium, talking about his company's latest charitable initiative. He looked tired, she noticed. The kind of bone-deep exhaustion she should have recognized before she left. Mid-sentence, he stumbled, one hand clutching his chest. The camera jolted as he fell, security rushing forward before the feed cut out. Reports are coming in that Mr. Drayton has been rushed to Mountain View Memorial Hospital. The news anchor was saying, "Sources close to the situation confirm he's in critical condition. Mr. Drayton has a previously undisclosed heart condition." The cereal box Raina had been holding slipped from her fingers, scattering Cheerios across the floor. Her world narrowed to a pinpoint of pain. A heart condition. He'd never told her. All those nights they'd talked about everything under the sun, and he'd kept this secret. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and regret. Raina moved mechanically through her shifts, checking her phone obsessively for updates. The news was frustratingly vague. Billionaire remains in critical condition. Drayton Enterprise Board calls emergency meeting. Prayer vigil held outside hospital. She wanted to call, to drive up there, to do something. But what right did she have? She'd walked away. Still, every night she found herself on her knees, praying with an intensity that surprised her. "Please, God, please don't let it end like this." On the 4th day, her mother called. Raina had been avoiding her calls, sending texts instead, but this time she answered. "Baby?" Dolores said softly. "I know something happened between you two. I'm not asking what, but I want you to remember something. God doesn't end stories halfway." Raina sank onto her bed, tears finally breaking free. "Mama, I messed up. I let pride get in the way. What if—" "No what ifs," Dolores interrupted firmly. "The question is, what are you going to do now?" After hanging up, Raina stood at her window, watching the last patches of winter snow melt in the parking lot. Spring was coming, the season Kevin had first mentioned in that strange prophecy at the diner. The season that had seemed so impossible then. Her mind went back to all their conversations in the chapel, his quiet strength when reading scripture, the way he'd looked at her when they danced at the gala. She thought about his silence at the board meeting, not born of shame, she realized now, but of a man trying to balance too many worlds at once. A man who might have been fighting his own battles while she'd been focused on hers. Taking a deep breath, Raina changed out of her work uniform. She packed a small bag, called Mrs. Peterson to ask for a few days off, and grabbed her car keys. The mountain road beckoned, winding up through the melting snow toward whatever waited at the end. As she drove, the late afternoon sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Patches of green were beginning to show through the snow, the first hints of spring's promise. Raina's hands were steady on the wheel now, her heart sure of its direction even if the future remained uncertain. The radio played softly as the miles rolled by, and she found herself humming along to an old hymn about grace and second chances. Whatever waited at the hospital, whether healing or heartbreak, she knew she had to face it. Some roads, once started, had to be followed to their end. The hospital loomed before her, its windows glowing like amber beacons in the gathering dusk. Raina sat in her parked car for several long moments, gathering her courage. The building seemed to pulse with both hope and fear, a place where lives changed forever, for better or worse. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out into the cool evening air. The automatic doors whispered open, releasing the sharp scent of antiseptic and floor cleaner. At the information desk, she cleared her throat. "I'm here to see Kevin Drayton." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly at the name. "Are you family?" Raina hesitated. What was she, really? Ex-fake fiancé? The waitress who ran away? "I'm someone who loves him," she finished simply. Before the receptionist could respond, a tall woman in a crisp blazer approached. "Miss Brooks," she said, studying Raina carefully. "I'm Sarah Chen, Mr. Drayton's executive assistant." Raina recognized her from the mansion. Always efficient, always watching. Sarah's expression was unreadable as she considered Raina's disheveled appearance and obvious exhaustion. "He's in intensive care," Sarah said finally. "Normally it's family only at this hour." She paused, then added more softly. "But I've worked for Kevin for 8 years. I've never seen him as happy as he was with you." Sarah led her through quiet corridors where monitors beeped and nurses spoke in hushed tones. Outside Kevin's room, she stopped. "The doctor says the next 24 hours are crucial. His heart." She took a steadying breath. "Just be gentle with him." Raina's own heart clenched as she stepped into the room. Kevin lay still against white sheets, looking smaller somehow without his usual quiet authority. Tubes and wires connected him to various machines that tracked his life in steady electronic pulses. His face was pale, but peaceful. She moved closer, tears already blurring her vision. A chair waited by his bedside, as if someone had known she would come. Sinking into it, she reached for his hand, the same hand that had helped her from cars, passed her cups of tea, held hers during their first dance. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry I let pride blind me. I'm sorry I ran instead of fighting for us." The tears fell freely now, dropping onto their joined hands. "I'm sorry I didn't see how hard you were trying to balance everything. I'm sorry I didn't ask if you were okay." The steady beep of his heart monitor provided a rhythm to her quiet sobs. She talked about everything, her fears, her hopes, how empty life had felt without him. The words poured out like a cleansing rain, washing away weeks of pain and misunderstanding. A slight movement made her pause. Kevin's eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. His grey eyes, though tired, found hers with the same intensity she remembered from that first night at the diner. A faint smile touched his lips. "By spring," he whispered hoarsely, "you'll birth me 3 sons." Fresh tears spilled down Raina's cheeks as understanding dawned. "You never meant it literally, did you?" Kevin's fingers tightened weakly around hers. "The vision showed me 3 gifts you would bring into my life." His voice was barely above a whisper, but clear. "Not children of the flesh, but of the spirit. Hope." He paused, gathering strength. "Faith and mercy. The fruits of a life redeemed by love." Raina finished softly, remembering their conversations about redemption and purpose. Kevin nodded slightly. "You served hope with every coffee cup, showed faith when everyone doubted, offered mercy when I least deserved it." His eyes drifted closed, but he kept speaking. "You didn't just change my image, Raina. You changed my heart." Raina bent her head, overwhelmed by the truth of it all. How had she not seen? Every argument about his public image had missed the point entirely. This wasn't about appearances or corporate takeovers. It was about two broken people being made whole through love and faith. Drawing a shaky breath, she did the only thing she could think of. She prayed. Out loud, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Dear God," she began, still holding Kevin's hand. "You brought us together in the strangest way. Now I'm asking, if it's your will, please heal him. Not for the company or the money or any of that, but because there's so much good he can do, so much love he has to give." She wiped her eyes with her free hand. "And Lord, thank you for showing me that sometimes the craziest sounding prophecies are just your way of getting our attention." She continued praying through the night, dozing occasionally but never letting go of Kevin's hand. Nurses came and went, checking vitals and adjusting medications. Sarah brought coffee and a sandwich, which Raina barely touched. As dawn began painting the sky in delicate pinks and golds, she noticed something different. Colour had crept back into Kevin's cheeks, replacing some of the alarming pallor. His breathing seemed easier, deeper. The doctor arrived for morning rounds, studying the monitors with intense concentration. After a thorough examination, he turned to Raina with cautious optimism. "His vital signs have improved significantly overnight," he said, shaking his head slightly. "The kind of recovery we're seeing, well, I'd call it a miracle in progress." Raina smiled through fresh tears, squeezing Kevin's hand gently. Outside the window, early spring sunshine painted the mountains in shades of promise. New life was stirring everywhere, in the budding trees, in Kevin's strengthening heartbeat, and in the love that had brought them both back to where they belonged. The hospital room became Raina's world over the next several days. She settled into a gentle rhythm, marking time by medication rounds and shift changes rather than clocks. The vinyl chair beside Kevin's bed molded to her shape, becoming as familiar as her old spot behind the diner counter. During the quiet morning hours, while sunrise painted the walls in soft gold, Raina would open her mother's weathered Bible. Her voice filled the sterile space with ancient words of comfort, turning psalms into lullabies for Kevin's healing sleep. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," she read, watching his chest rise and fall steadily. "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul." Between readings, she shared stories from her years at the diner, tales of midnight regulars and dawn truckers, of kindness found in coffee cups and wisdom served alongside pie. Her words wove a tapestry of small-town life, bringing warmth to the clinical surroundings. "Remember Mrs. Henderson?" she asked one afternoon, adjusting Kevin's blanket. She ordered the same thing every Tuesday, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Said it reminded her of her mama's cooking. She smiled at the memory. "That's where I learned that sometimes the simplest things carry the most love." Kevin grew stronger with each passing day. Colour returned to his cheeks, and his grip strengthened when he held her hand. The doctors spoke of miracle recoveries, but Raina saw it for what it was, grace made visible. One particularly bright morning, Kevin managed to sit up without assistance. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the silver threads in his dark hair. His grey eyes, clear and focused, found hers with familiar intensity. "Raina," he said softly, reaching for her hand. "There's something I need to say." She moved closer, perching on the edge of his bed. "What is it?" "God's given me another season," he began, his voice quiet but steady. "The doctors say I shouldn't be alive, but here I am, breathing, thinking, feeling." He squeezed her hand gently. "And I know exactly what I want to do with this gift of time." Raina's heart quickened as Kevin continued. "I want to spend it walking beside you. Not as a business arrangement, not as a corporate strategy, but as your husband." His eyes never left hers. If you'll have me." Tears spilled down Raina's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she found her voice, it came out as a whisper. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The hospital chaplain, a kind-faced man named Pastor James, agreed to perform the ceremony in the small chapel on the first floor. The space was intimate, with wooden pews that held decades of prayers and stained glass windows that filtered the afternoon light into jewel-toned patterns. The staff helped Kevin dress in a simple dark suit, wheeling him down in a chair despite his gentle protests that he could walk. Raina wore a cream-colored dress she'd found in a nearby boutique, nothing fancy but elegant in its simplicity. Her mother, Dolores, arrived in her wheelchair, her face glowing with joy. She reached for Raina's hands before the ceremony, her grip surprisingly strong. "Baby," she said, voice thick with emotion. "I've been praying for this day since you were born, not for wealth or status, but for a man who would love you like this, with his whole heart and soul." The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. No elaborate decorations, no crowd of onlookers, just two hearts joining before God, witnessed by those who mattered most. Kevin's voice was clear and strong as he spoke his vows, promising to cherish and protect, to walk in faith together. Raina's voice trembled slightly as she made her own promises, but her words rang with certainty. "I take you, Kevin, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part." Laughter mixed with tears as they exchanged rings, simple bands that symbolized their unending commitment. When Pastor James pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering broke into warm applause. Even some of the nurses who had cared for Kevin wiped away tears. That evening, back in Kevin's hospital room, the space felt different, transformed not by any physical change, but by the sacred promises they'd made. Kevin lay in his bed, still tired from the day's activities but happy, his new ring catching the light as he held Raina's hand. "I never thought I'd find this kind of peace again," he murmured, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "After losing Sarah, I thought that part of my life was over. But God had other plans." Raina squeezed his hand gently. "He always does. Sometimes we just have to be still long enough to see them." As night settled over the hospital, bringing its familiar quiet, Raina felt something new settle in her heart. Where fear and doubt had once lived, she now felt peace blooming, strong and sure as spring flowers after winter's frost. Kevin's breathing deepened into sleep, but his hand remained firmly wrapped around hers, as if even in dreams he wanted to keep her close. She watched the city lights twinkle beyond the window, remembering that rainy night in the diner when a stranger had made an outrageous prophecy. God's plans, she realized, often looked like madness at first glance, but when viewed through the lens of faith and time, they revealed themselves as perfect in their own way. Kevin stirred slightly in his sleep, mumbling something that sounded like her name. Raina smiled, adjusting her chair to get more comfortable without letting go of his hand. In this simple moment, no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, she found everything she'd ever needed. Love, faith, and the quiet certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Spring arrived in earnest as Kevin's recovery progressed, painting the mountain estate with fresh colors. Each morning brought new strength to his steps, and Raina watched with joy as the pallor left his cheeks, replaced by healthy color. Their days fell into a gentle rhythm, beginning with shared prayers at dawn. "Take it slow," Raina would remind him as they walked the estate's winding paths, her hand steady on his elbow. Kevin would smile, accepting her care with grace, a change from the commanding businessman he'd once been. The morning air carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, and sometimes they'd pause just to breathe it in. Each step is a gift, Kevin would say, his voice growing stronger day by day. I don't want to waste a single one. Their morning walks gradually lengthened from 5 minutes to 15, then to 30. Raina kept careful notes of his progress in a journal, tracking everything from his daily steps to his medication schedule. The doctors had been clear. Recovery would take patience and dedication. By mid-morning, they'd settle in his study, where Raina helped him sort through business correspondence. She'd read letters aloud while he dictated responses, her neat handwriting filling page after page. What started as assistance soon became partnership, as she offered insights that surprised even Kevin. You see things differently, he told her one afternoon, watching her organize his chaotic desk. You see people, not just profits. The decision to sell his penthouse came naturally. The gleaming high-rise apartment, once a symbol of his success, now felt empty compared to the warmth of their mountain home. This is where we found each other, Kevin said as they signed the papers. This is where we'll build our life. Their focus turned to the estate's chapel, a beautiful stone building that had stood mostly unused. It shouldn't be empty, Raina suggested one evening. Not when there's so much need in the community. Kevin's eyes lit up at the idea. Together, they developed plans to transform the chapel into a community center. They hired local contractors, insisting on fair wages and family-friendly hours. Raina oversaw the renovations, making sure the space remained sacred while becoming more welcoming. The chapel's dedication ceremony drew hundreds from the surrounding towns. Kevin, standing without support now, spoke about transformation, not just of buildings, but of hearts. Every act of kindness, he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd, is another child of mercy being born into the world. Their work didn't stop there. They established regular meal services for the hungry, converting the chapel's basement into a warm dining space. Raina's experience as a waitress proved invaluable as she trained volunteers and organized serving schedules. Kevin, despite his wealth, insisted on serving alongside everyone else. Remember when you used to serve me coffee? He'd tease as they ladled soup together. You were a better tipper back then, she'd reply with a wink, making him laugh. The tutoring program started small, just a few local kids struggling with homework. But word spread quickly about the kind couple at the big estate who offered free help and hot meals. Soon, the chapel's study room buzzed with activity every afternoon. Raina discovered she had a gift for teaching math, while Kevin's tech background made him perfect for science lessons. They worked side by side, helping children unlock their potential. Each mind we help grow, Kevin would say, is another light in the darkness. Their hospital visits became weekly events. They'd bring books, flowers, and most importantly, time. Kevin spoke openly about his own recovery, sharing hope with others facing similar battles. Raina noticed how he lingered longest with those who seemed most afraid, his quiet strength offering comfort. Through it all, their love deepened in unexpected ways. It wasn't about grand gestures or luxury anymore. It was about shared purpose, about hands clasped in prayer and working side by side to help others. They found joy in simple moments, counting donation supplies, planning community events, or just sitting quietly in the chapel as sunset painted the windows gold. One evening, after a particularly busy day at the community center, Raina sat at their kitchen table, surrounded by papers and plans. She'd been drafting ideas for a non-profit organization, something that would ensure their work continued and grew. "What are you thinking?" Kevin asked, bringing her a cup of tea. "I'm thinking about legacy," she replied, showing him her notes. "About making sure this work lives on, even beyond us. A foundation in your name, focused on community service and education." Kevin studied the papers, his expression thoughtful. "Not in my name," he said finally. "In our name. Everything good that's happening here, it's because of both of us." Raina's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the man before her. Gone was the lonely billionaire who'd made that strange prophecy in a small-town diner. In his place stood a husband who'd learned to serve, to love without conditions, to find joy in giving rather than receiving. "Remember what you told me about 3 sons?" she asked softly. Kevin nodded, taking her hand. "Hope, faith, and mercy. But I was wrong about one thing. They're not just my sons, they're ours. Every person we help, every life we touch, every bit of hope we share, these are the children of our love." Together, they continued working on the foundation plans, their hands intertwined on the table. Outside their window, the mountain air carried the sound of children laughing in the chapel playground, a symphony of joy that echoed their shared purpose. Their love had indeed borne fruit, not in the way either had expected, but in ways that reached far beyond themselves, touching lives and changing hearts, one act of kindness at a time. The morning of the ribbon-cutting ceremony dawned clear and bright, with a gentle spring breeze carrying the scent of fresh blossoms across the estate grounds. Raina stood before her mirror, smoothing down her cream-colored dress, her hands trembling slightly with anticipation. "Ready?" Kevin asked from the doorway, looking distinguished in his navy suit, despite the slight pallor that still lingered from his illness. The Three Sons Foundation headquarters occupied a renovated historic building in town, its red brick facade freshly cleaned and its windows gleaming in the morning light. A modest crowd had gathered, local families, veterans, community leaders, and yes, even reporters who once whispered cruel words about their relationship. Raina's mother, Dolores, sat in her wheelchair in the front row, beaming with pride as Kevin and Raina approached the podium together. The red ribbon fluttered in the breeze as Kevin began to speak. 2 years ago, I made a prophecy in a small diner, he said, his voice clear and strong. I told a waitress she would birth me 3 sons. Today we're seeing the true meaning of those words come to life. Raina stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 3 sons isn't just about providing shelter or education, she explained. It's about creating family for those who need it most. Every single mother who finds stability here, every veteran who rebuilds their life. They're all part of this extended family we're building together. The program details impressed even the skeptics. 3 sons would provide fully furnished apartments for up to 20 single mothers and 15 veterans at a time. Beyond housing, it offered childcare, job training, mental health support, and mentorship programs. Every resident would have access to educational opportunities and career counseling. Local news cameras rolled as Kevin and Raina cut the ribbon together, their hands joined on the scissors. The crowd applauded, and several reporters who had once mocked their relationship now pushed forward with eager questions. This is your first joint interview, one reporter noted. What made you decide to speak publicly now? Kevin squeezed Raina's hand before answering. Because this isn't about us anymore. It's about showing others that grace and second chances are real, that God's love can transform lives in unexpected ways. Raina added, we want people to know that your past doesn't define your future. Whether you're a waitress from a small town or a lonely billionaire, God can write a new story with your life. The interviews continued through the morning, with Kevin and Raina sharing their journey openly for the first time. They spoke about their unconventional beginning, their shared faith, and the vision that had brought them together. Several reporters wiped away tears as Raina described Kevin's hospital recovery and their quiet wedding in the chapel. By late afternoon, exhaustion began to set in. They thanked the last of the visitors and climbed into their car, both emotionally drained but deeply satisfied. Instead of heading straight home, Kevin directed their driver to take the long route through the estate's orchard. The trees were in full bloom, their branches heavy with pink and white blossoms. Kevin helped Raina out of the car, and they walked slowly among the trees, their footsteps cushioned by fallen petals. "Remember when you first came to the estate?" Kevin asked, drawing her close. "You thought I was crazy." Raina laughed softly. "I thought we both were. A billionaire and a waitress, thrown together by a prophecy. It sounded like a fairy tale." "But it wasn't about fairy tales, was it?" Kevin's voice grew tender as he held her. "It was about purpose, about letting God turn our broken pieces into something beautiful." The setting sun painted the orchard in shades of gold and rose as Kevin whispered against her hair. "You kept the promise, you know. You birthed them all." Raina looked up at him questioningly. "Hope," he explained. "When you believed in me during my illness. Faith, when you trusted God's plan even when it seemed impossible. And mercy, in how you've helped create this foundation to serve others." They stood there in the fragrant orchard, surrounded by the evidence of spring's renewal, their hearts full with the knowledge that their love had indeed borne fruit. Not in the way they'd initially thought, but in ways that would transform countless lives for generations to come. Easter morning dawned with extraordinary grace over the Blue Ridge Mountains. The first rays of sunlight pierced through lingering mist, turning the valley into a sea of liquid gold. At the mountain estate's chapel, dew sparkled on fresh flowers that lined the stone pathway, their petals still curled tight against the morning chill. Raina stood at the chapel's entrance, greeting each arrival with a warm embrace. The modest building, once a private sanctuary, now buzzed with life and purpose. Families from the Three Sons Foundation, single mothers with bright-eyed children, veterans with grateful smiles, filled the wooden pews one by one. "Mrs. Drayton," called out 6-year-old Maria, running up in a yellow Easter dress. "Look what my mommy made me." The little girl twirled, her dress floating like a daffodil in the breeze. Her mother, Sarah, followed more slowly, pride evident in her tired eyes. Just 3 months ago, they'd arrived at Three Sons with nothing but a single suitcase. Now Sarah had a steady job, and Maria was thriving in school. Kevin appeared beside Raina, touching her lower back gently. His grey eyes held that familiar warmth that still made her heart skip. "The sunrise service is about to begin," he murmured. Inside, morning light streamed through the cross-shaped window, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden floor. The small choir, made up entirely of Foundation residents, gathered near the piano. Their voices rose in gentle harmony, practicing the hymns they'd prepared for weeks. Dolores, Raina's mother, sat in her wheelchair near the front, her health much improved since moving to the estate. She patted Raina's hand as she passed, whispering, "God sure does work in mysterious ways, baby." The chapel filled quickly. Nearly 50 people, all touched by the Foundation's work. Children fidgeted in their Sunday best, their patent leather shoes swinging beneath the pews. Veterans sat straight-backed and dignified, some still bearing visible scars of their service. Young mothers held sleeping infants, their faces peaceful in this moment of respite. As the service began, Raina's gaze drifted to the 3 words painted in elegant script above the altar. Hope, faith, mercy. The morning sun illuminated each letter, making them glow like burnished gold. Those words, Kevin's prophesied sons, had taken on such profound meaning over the past year. The choir's voices lifted in amazing grace, the harmonies floating up to the vaulted ceiling. Outside, through the chapel's windows, children who were too young to sit still played in the dewy grass. Their laughter carried inside like wind chimes, a joyful counterpoint to the hymn. Kevin stood to address the congregation, his voice steady and warm. "On this Easter morning, we celebrate renewal," he began. "Just as Christ rose to give us new life, we too can rise from our darkest moments." His eyes met Rainer's, and in that look passed all their shared history, the strange prophecy in a small-town diner, the painful misunderstandings, his near-death experience, and the profound love that had grown between them. The service continued with scripture readings and more hymns. A young veteran named Marcus shared his testimony of finding hope through the foundation. A single mother spoke through happy tears about watching her children thrive in their new home. Each story was a testament to transformation, to the power of faith and community. As the morning progressed, sunlight filled more of the chapel, warming the wooden pews and illuminating the faces of those gathered. Children who had been playing outside began drifting back in, drawn by the music and the sense of joy that filled the space. Raina stood to read the final scripture, her voice clear and strong. As she spoke of resurrection and new beginnings, she felt the truth of every word in her bones. Every trial that had brought them here, her struggling years at the diner, Kevin's loss of his first fiancée, their initial mistrust and misunderstandings had been stepping stones to this moment. The choir began their final song, a gentle rendition of "Morning Has Broken." Kevin moved to stand beside Raina beneath the cross-shaped window. He took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, comfortably. Their eyes met in that quiet way of souls who have weathered storms together and emerged stronger. Through the windows, they could see the valley below, where spring had painted the landscape in vibrant greens and delicate pink blossoms. A warm breeze rustled through the budding trees, carrying the promise of new life, of seasons changing, of prophecies fulfilled in ways more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. The sun had risen fully now, its golden light filling every corner of the chapel. As the choir's voices soared, Raina squeezed Kevin's hand, overwhelmed with gratitude. In this moment, surrounded by the community they'd built together, she understood completely. The three sons Kevin had prophesied that rainy night in the diner weren't children of flesh and blood. They were the virtues that had transformed not just their lives, but the lives of everyone in this room. Hope, faith, and mercy, these were the true fruits of their love, multiplying and touching lives in ways they never could have predicted. As the final notes of the hymn faded away, the wind whispered through the chapel, gentle as a blessing, carrying the sweet scent of spring and new beginnings. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.